Donald Trump thought bombing Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan would end Iran's nuclear program forever. He thought destroying the centrifuges would destroy the ambition. He thought wrong, because Iran didn't beg for inspectors to come back. They didn't ask for mercy. They walked to the podium, and they quit the only treaty on earth that was legally preventing them from building a bomb. And as of 6:47 this morning, that withdrawal is now formally before Iran's parliament. Here is what you need to understand, Sayan. I need you to stay with me because this is not a foreign policy story. This is a story about what happens to your gas bill, your retirement account, and every assumption you have made about how this war ends. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is not a suggestion. It is the legal architecture that has governed every sanction, every inspection, every red line drawn against Iran for the last 5 decades. When Iran was enriching uranium to levels that alarmed the world, the mechanism that allowed the United States to respond, the sanctions, the IAEA access, the international coalition, all of it was built on the foundation of Iran being inside that treaty and violating it. And Iran inside the NPT, breaking the rules, gives the world a lever, a tool, a legal basis for pressure. And Iran outside the NPT is not breaking any rules because there are no rules left to break. That distinction between a country cheating on a treaty and a country that simply no longer has a treaty is the difference between a crisis the world has a playbook for and one it does not. And the moment that lands on oil markets, the number at your gas pump stops being a political argument. It becomes a math problem. I need to take you back to 11/20 on the night of February 28th, because what happened in the hours after the first American bombs fell on Tehran is the reason Iran's parliament is doing what it's doing right now. The bombs started falling just after midnight Tehran time. Fordow first, then Natanz, then the Isfahan complex Manyab, the one Iranian engineers had spent 15 years hardening against exactly this kind of strike. The explosions were not surgical, they were architectural. The goal was not to set the program back, the goal was to end it. And for approximately 4 hours, it looked like it had worked. Then the emergency session began at 2:15 a.m., while fires were still burning at 3 separate nuclear facilities. Members of Iran's Parliamentary National Security Commission gathered in a reinforced building in central Tehran. No phones, no aides beyond a handful of trusted staff. The agenda, according to 3 sources present that night, was supposed to be about casualties and military response. It became about something else entirely. The question that kept appearing in that room, the question one participant later described as the only one anyone actually cared about answering, was not retaliation, not escalation. It was reciprocity, specifically the absence of it. Iran had been inside the NPT for 56 years. It had allowed inspectors into facilities it considered sovereign territory. It had submitted to oversight regimes that no nuclear-armed state on Earth has ever accepted for itself. It had played by the rules, and the rules had not protected a single centrifuge. 6 days later, Steve Witkoff sat down with reporters for a background briefing on the American negotiating position. It was 47 pages long, and according to every serious analyst who reviewed the transcript, it revealed something more damaging than any Iranian counterproposal could have. Witkoff did not understand what he was negotiating about. He flagged the Tehran research reactor, a facility that has been producing medical isotopes for cancer treatment since Argentina retrofitted it in the 1980s, as a weapons threat. He conflated radioisotopes for hospitals with fissile material for warheads. He spoke about Iran's enrichment program as though the distinction between 20% and 90% was a technicality rather than the entire ballgame. The transcript reached Iranian negotiators within 6 hours. A senior Iranian diplomat, speaking later through a back-channel contact, described the moment they reached page 31 in language that was precise and devastating. "That was the moment," the diplomat said. "We understood Washington was not negotiating. They were auditioning for a war they had already decided to fight." Then the 15-point peace plan arrived in Tehran, not through any official channel, through Islamabad, through Pakistani intermediaries who had spent the better part of a week quietly shuttling between capitals, carrying a document the White House was simultaneously claiming did not exist and enthusiastically describing to friendly reporters. Points 1, 2, and 3 were variations of the same demand. Iran must permanently dismantle its enrichment capability, not pause it, not cap it, dismantle it permanently. Iran's response, sent back through the same Pakistani channel, was 214 words. The intermediaries who carried it back described it to Al Jazeera's bureau as the shortest diplomatic response they had ever been asked to transport. One of them said the document felt less like a reply and more like a door closing. And it was in the hours after that 214-word document landed in Washington that Mojtaba Khamenei, supreme leader for exactly 8 days, sat across from the Parliamentary Security Commission and read a single piece of paper. He set it down. He did not speak for what felt like close to 2 full minutes. When he finally did, he said 5 words. They were never going to stop. He was not talking about the bombs. The bombs were not the revelation. He was talking about the demands, the permanent dismantlement, the 3,800 words that added up to a single instruction: cease to exist as a nuclear state forever, unconditionally, in exchange for nothing in writing. The NPT vote was no longer a debate. It was a direction. But here's what nobody is saying out loud right now, and it is the only thing that actually matters. Everyone covering this story is framing Iran's NPT withdrawal as an escalation, as Iran moving toward a bomb. That framing is not wrong, but it is incomplete, and the part it is missing is the part that changes everything. Iran's parliament is not just making a nuclear decision. They are setting a trap, and as of this morning, Donald Trump is standing directly inside it. Here is how it works. The NPT is not just a treaty about nuclear weapons. It is the legal foundation of the entire sanctions architecture the United States has spent 20 years constructing against Iran. Every major sanctions package, the ones that collapsed Iran's currency, cut it off from the SWIFT banking system, drove inflation to 70%. Every one of those was legally justified at the international level by Iran's non-compliance with NPT obligations. Remove one of those conditions, and the entire legal structure shifts. An Iran outside the NPT is not an Iran violating international law. It is an Iran exercising a legal right, written into Article X of the treaty itself, which requires only 90 days' notice and a statement that supreme national interests are at stake. An Iran that has been bombed for 30 days straight has no difficulty making that statement. China and Russia, who have been looking for an exit from the sanctions architecture for years, now have an argument that is not just political but procedural. You cannot sanction a country for violating a treaty it is no longer party to. That is trapdoor 1, trapdoor 2. Mojtaba Khamenei has not issued a fatwa prohibiting nuclear weapons. His father's religious ruling, the one Iranian officials cited for years as their theological commitment to non-weaponization, died with the man who wrote it. It has not been renewed. It has not been reaffirmed. The new supreme leader has made no legal or religious commitment against nuclear weapons, none. An Iran outside the NPT with no fatwa, with 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, and with a supreme leader who has yet to define his nuclear doctrine, that is a country that has removed every formal constraint on its nuclear ambition simultaneously. That is not the doomsday clock moving 1 minute forward. That is someone taking the clock off the wall. So where does this end? 3 scenarios, 7 days to find out. Scenario A: Trump strikes before the parliamentary vote is ratified. He reads the NPT withdrawal as the provocation it is designed to look like and orders strikes on Iranian power infrastructure before the April 6th deadline. Iran's NPT exit becomes a rallying point rather than a legal fact. China convenes an emergency Security Council session within hours. Russia seconds every motion. The coalition the United States has been holding together begins to crack in ways that are very difficult to reverse. Oil markets reprice overnight for a conflict with no visible diplomatic exit. Your gas bill does not go down in that scenario. It goes up, and it stays there. Scenario B: Trump holds the pause. Iran ratifies. The IAEA loses all remaining access. Whatever Iran does with its centrifuges and its enriched uranium stockpile happens in complete darkness. Enrichment resumes. At what level, at which sites, on what timeline? Nobody outside Tehran will know. The outcome this war was fought to prevent is now unfolding on a legal timeline that cannot be bombed its way off of. Scenario C, the one nobody is writing about tonight. The Guardian Council blinks quietly, tables the legislation, citing procedural review. And suddenly, for the first time since February 28th, there is a reason for both sides to sit back down. Iran just used the NPT vote as the counterproposal nobody in Washington knew how to read. The 15-point plan, the one Iran's military spokesperson said would never happen, not now, not ever, is back on the table, on Iran's terms, with Iran holding the pen. The April 6th deadline and the NPT ratification vote are on a collision course. When they intersect, everything about this war changes. I will be here the moment either one breaks, with everything you need to know, before the mainstream coverage catches up. Is Iran's NPT withdrawal a genuine move toward a bomb, or the most sophisticated piece of diplomatic leverage we have seen in this entire war? Drop your answer below. Make your case. I read every single one. And if you are not subscribed, do it now. Because by the time this is breaking news, it will already be over. Subscribe, the clock is running.